First Finger Lakes Wine Alliance tasting of red wines. And we're going to get started. What we'd like you to do this evening is taste through our first flight of 4 wines. And then we're going to have some time to go through each wine individually after that. And we're going to start this first flight with Lakewood 2009 Lemberger. And that's going to be $15.99 a bottle. And we'll go through some of the specifics at the end of the tasting. And your second wine this evening is going to be the 2009 Lemberger from Fox Run Vineyards in the Finger Lakes. And checking for a price on that. Tricia, do you know what the price on that is?
$17.99.
$17.99. And then in the third glass, we have Anthony Road 2010 Cab Franc Lemberger Blend. Again, that's 2010 Cabernet Franc Lemberger Blend from Anthony Road Wine Company on Seneca Lake in the Finger Lakes. And then our fourth glass this evening is going to be from Inspire More. The wine is called Wisdom Cabernet Franc Reserve 2010 vintage. Price on that, Tim?
$34.99.
$34.99. So at this point in time, we would like you folks to go ahead through the wines, taste through those 4 wines, and then we will try and give about 5 minutes for each wine. We'll stop and talk with the winery representatives after you have a chance to taste through all 4. And the winemakers will take some questions at that time. So for right now, we'd like you to just go ahead and get started with your tasting. My name is Jeff Hauk. I'm going to be your moderator for the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance this evening. So if you want me to field any questions this evening, just let me know.
We're already receiving some tweets in. Dave Felchuk has tweeted that everything's all good, and he started tasting. He loved Chris's Lemberger.
Thanks, Dave.
Let me get back with you, Tricia.
That's right.
It's when you spin it, it hits you in the eye. It's nice to have something to tap.
Would a tissue be good?
That would be fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Just in case. Oh yeah, that'll take. Yeah.
So we're going to go have you think about in your mind there a few more moments. We'd like you to move on to that second wine, the Fox Run 2009 Lemberger. Those of you media members who had sent us some questions at some point during the tasting this evening, we'll try and get back to you with some answers for some of the questions that you had. So if you've been riveted to your seat waiting for the answer, this panel of winemakers will have it so.
We're here to help.
Okay, had everybody had a chance who's on the media to taste through all 4 wines at this time?
I've got one more to go.
Okay, we'll give you another minute or two. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start to go through these wines, and we'd love to get a little feedback for the winemakers and some questions. The first wine we'd like to talk about tonight is from Lakewood Vineyards, that 2009 Lemberger. Any questions for winemaker Chris Stamp? Those of you who don't know the Stamp family, Chris's family is one of the older winemaking families in the Finger Lakes. They're located on Seneca Lake. Chris does a great job, and I'm sure he'd love to hear a little bit of feedback about his wine and answer any questions you have.
Yeah, Jeff, I have a question.
Yes, Dave.
I got these super fine tannins in Chris's wine. I was wondering how he has arrived.
Did you get that, Chris? I think it was the gist of it was like he enjoyed the fine tannins in your wine.
To answer that question, Dave, one of the reasons that the 09 was the first vintage that we released as a 100% varietal Lemberger is that it's taken a lot of adjustment in our cellar practices to fill out the middle on the Lemberger. And so in the past we'd always blended it, but every year we looked toward making it as a varietal, and I think it took us probably till 2009 until we found ways to adjust our vinification practices to fill in the middle. And it has to do with just skin time, barrel selection, cap management, and we'll get back to you because we're still learning on the grape, although some years are a little easier to get fleshiness, like 2010, and 09 was a cooler year. And I gotta say there's some tannin augmentation during crush.
Okay, Dave, did that answer that for you? Anybody else have some questions for Chris this evening?
Okay.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else have anything they'd like to ask Chris before we move on to wine number 2? Any of the other winemakers care to comment?
On the wine.
What was that?
I had a question on the oak treatment on the wine.
Yes.
And is there a preferable oak, French or American?
At this point, I have to admit we're still taking a bit of a shotgun approach to it. I'm not convinced that French oak's the way to go. We have tried New York State, 100% New York State oak barrels on it, and I really like those. We're trying some Hungarian this year on it, And then there's some interesting permutations we've liked, and that's American oak barrels with Hungarian oak heads on them. And then we're messing with different toast levels. Every year we get a little closer and we tighten our circle around the kind of barrels that we want to use for it. But I don't think there's any one particular barrel that alone is going to do the best. And I think a little bit of a mix shows the best in the end. Good question. Thank you.
Probably got time for one more question for Chris here before we move on. Okay, we're going to go ahead on then to wine number 2 from Fox Run Vineyards, 2009 Lemberger. We have with us tonight Tricia Renshaw from Fox Run. She's the assistant winemaker. Great palate, does a great job for Peter Bell there at Fox Run. And if you have any questions for Tricia, go ahead and fire away at her.
Why did you guys choose to blend? Was it Cab Franc in this? Was it kind of real Cab Franc?
Yeah, this one has a little bit of Merlot and a little bit of Pinot Noir.
So, Chris, we had a question from one of the other winemakers. Tricia, maybe you could comment to the other folks about the use of blending with the Lemberger grape.
Historically, in our red wines, we have done some cross blending, just a little bit, maybe mid-palate, needed just a little fleshing. And often we find in the case of Lemberger, the finish needs just a little bit of sweetening. And like you, we accomplish that mostly using American oak. Some French, yes, some a little bit of Hungarian, but a lot of American oak tends to lend that sweet spiciness that we're looking for. But in this case, we just wanted a little bit more fleshness, which we got from the Merlot, and a little bit of floral lift, which we got from the Pinot Noir, just little bits here and there. 2010 is the first year that we're releasing a Lemberger that's varietally pure, just nothing but Lemberger. It's not something that we feel strongly about. We just want to make the very best wine, and if adding a little bit of another variety makes the best wine, that's what we're going to do. In the case of 2010, it wants to be by itself. 2009 seemed to benefit from a little bit of help from its friends.
Definitely 2009. Would you like to just speak to the growing season, Tricia?
Oh, it was, it should have been a challenging year. It should have been a very difficult year because we didn't have much sunlight. We had, it was very cool. We had ample ripening, but we weren't really sure whether we were going to get deep flavors or not. We weren't sure where the acid levels were going to finish up. And what we found, especially in the case of Lemberger, is that the cool growing season wasn't a hindrance in the least. In fact, just the opposite. With Lemberger, it has a rotundum, which is the flavor component that is in black peppers, also in Syrah, and there's quite a lot of it in Lemberger. And in the cool years, there's more of it. And in the warm years, there's less of it, but it's got a broader mouthfeel. And so whether the year is cool or whether the year is warm, Lemberger rewards us very nicely with a beautiful wine that consumers seem to understand very well, whether it's fleshy and spicy, or in the case of 2009, where it was a little cooler, lots of black pepper and berry, that we can say to a consumer, look, yes, here's black pepper, and maybe for the first time, they can pick out a flavor in a wine that it's something maybe they've never been able to do before.
Great.
And they seem to be very excited about it.
Anyone else have a question for Tricia? Well, I think what we're going to do then is move on to the wine number 3. We have with us from Anthony Road Wine Company tonight, Peter Beecraft. Peter does a great job at Anthony Road. They're very lucky to have him, and he brought with him this evening that 2010 Cab Franc Lemberger blend. 2010, a much different vintage than 2009, so it'll be interesting and see if we maybe have some different comments. Anyone like to ask Peter some questions or comment to him?
It's not all red wine.
Really?
What you're seeing up there is what I'm seeing on the screen.
Do you see me?
Do you see Peter Beecraft waving at you on the screen? Chris or Tricia, any of you have anything you'd like to say about this wine?
I was gonna comment that, I mean, there's a huge difference in vintages here, and I really like the added strength in this wine, and I like the little higher level of pepper that we're seeing in the cooler vintage. So I think it really speaks to what you were saying, that this grape can make entirely different wines on those different years, but I mean, both are, I find them really agreeable.
Yeah, something that I find out, and you bring up the vintage, which is these wines are all vintage specific, and in the cooler years like '09, the fruits are, you get a lot of this berry. They tend to be more the red berries. There's even a little bit of cranberry in here. There's a bit of tart cherry, and then in the warm years like 2010, I found that the Lemberger brought more dark, like dark blackberry and blueberry. We get a lot of blueberry in this wine. That's just an interesting. When it's warmer, the berries are darker.
That's kind of the darkness kind of follows through with the fruit.
Right.
Yeah, and the cocoa comes from we get that in the Cab Franc, and of course there'll be some barrel influence on that as well, and then even you get hints of floral, which you can get in Lemberger as well, both Cab Franc and Lemberger, but in this blend here, it's even more amplified.
You guys, 2 09s, 1 2010, but one of the things I like about Bonfunkish, which I didn't see in any of these 3 wines, is kind of that kind of smoked meat character. And I didn't pick any of that up. Comments on that?
Yeah, the smoked meat. Do you guys come across that as well? I mean,
I think
sometimes
more it depends on the barrel.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like there's certain ones that I quit using because I see too much of that.
there are some each barrel is different, obviously, but that is something that we get in the Lemberger, the smoked meat, even almost like a European delicatessen. It's
I actually enjoy that.
I do
Not
too. Yeah,
much.
no. Because I mean, it's one of those things about wine. It transports you. These smells, and the taste can transport you to some other place where you've been.
So these guys would love to hear a little bit back from the media end of this. Anyone care to comment to Peter on the Anthony Road? You are the quietest bunch of media folks that I've ever been on a line with.
Well, I'll give you something on our end. We don't do a Cab Franc. We don't do a Lemberger. We grow both of them, make wine from both of them. But we do this. I mean, for us, this is our premium red wine, and we're sort of going all in. And we felt that this could be that signature red blend for our area. The region, but our winery in specific, two red grapes that grow really well in our region, and it's like this perfect marriage, the way that we look at it. What one lacks, hopefully the other one makes up for it, and to bring consistency to our red program, we do this the blend of the two, and the blend differs depending on what the wine needs. There you go.
What's
There
the
you have
price
it.
on that, Peter?
$19.99.
So I think then what we'll do is move on to wine 4 this evening. And we have Tim Moore, the owner of Inspire Moore, with us tonight. And you had a chance to try his 2010 Cabernet Franc Reserve, which is called Wisdom. And Tim has kind of a cool theme at his winery with different names for some of the wines. And
Not Wisdom, it's actually the video here.
Tim, would you like to field a few questions tonight about that wine?
Absolutely.
And you could also feel free to discuss anything with regards to the winemaking and vineyard site while you go along.
Well,
Do you have any questions about Wisdom? I'm not familiar with this winery.
That's good. Well, that's not good.
Well, you are now.
Yep. Somebody have a question about the winery or the wine that we're talking about?
Yeah, this is Dave. I have a question, and that is that we're just not very familiar with the Inspire More Winery, although we're pretty familiar with Finger Lakes. Do we have any thoughts on the philosophy of winemaking there? What are you going for with this particular wine?
Well, this is actually the first vintage, the 2010 vintage that we released actually 3 different reserve wines. So Wisdom is, the Wisdom Reserve follows our regular bottle of Wisdom, which we produce around 300 cases of. This is just a small 100 case lot. We are a small winery producing now around 4,000 cases. We do a lot of different blends. We also do a Blaufränkisch, Limburger, a couple different wines from that variety. This particular wine is actually sourced from 3 different vineyard sites using 3 different clones of Cabernet Franc. And actually, I got to thank Chris because he introduced me to New York State Oak 3 or 4 years ago at his winery. We actually do barrel fermentation on all our reds with a good portion of Finger Lakes oak. We crush the fruit that goes into the open top barrels for about 10 days of fermentation. And then this wine was actually finished in Hungarian oak. 2010 was just a tremendous vintage in the Finger Lakes. We're quite excited about the 3 different clones that we're working with. We do actually clonal selection of Cab Francs in our tasting room. And this wine was just a great kind of old world style of Cab Franc. And we don't do a reserve every year, but felt this was a good benchmark for the vintage and our production.
Tim, did you mention which lake you guys were on?
I have a question, Jeff.
What was your question?
Yeah, I was wondering how consumers are reacting to Moore's Dick Reno style pricing.
Well, like I said, this is a reserve wine, and it's not widely available. Most of these wines in that price range are actually sold directly through our tasting room or with our wine club. So with 100 cases, it's not broadly available. But like I said, it is a reserve style wine, and we don't offer those every year.
Is that what we're calling it now? Renault style pricing?
That's right. It's about availability, really. Naples, New York. Yeah, we're actually on Canandaigua Lake, the most beautiful lake in the Finger Lakes.
All right, if we didn't have any other questions for Tim, what I'd like for the panel that we have up here right now is we're going to ask you guys, and you guys can kind of decide which one of you want to field the question. We had requested from the media some questions to ask these guys, and I have a few of them here. So the first one was, one of the questions was, someone noticed there was only one blend. Are there common red blends in the area? And has there been any trends toward 1 or 2 specific red grape species over the past 2 years? Any one of you guys want to take that question and answer it for the media?
Well, I'll just start it. Obviously, we've got the Cab Franc Lemberger blend. Started this in 05. And I think since that point, I think there's about 5 or 6 other wineries now that are doing this style of wine as well. So, I mean, on the small scale, this blend is starting to grow. I mean, there's most wineries are doing a Meritage. I mean, those classic Bordeaux grapes for reds, and Atwater's got this big blend, and Vinny can talk about that when he comes in next round. Any other unique blends out there?
Sounds like there's a lot of experimentation, but not necessarily a consensus about Finger Lakes blend yet at this point.
I think a little bit though, and Peter hit on it, that I think Cabernet and this Lemberger do marry pretty nicely, and I think all of us have messed around with that to one degree or another. And I think there's some years that the two kind of need each other, and other years maybe, you know, some of us will venture to make the Lemberger on its own. I think a lot of times Lemberger needs Cab Franc more than Cab Franc needs Lemberger, but I think maybe that's our only shortcomings as winemakers. We're learning this grape. It's emerging quickly though, and I think you come back in a couple of years, you can see far more Lembergers in the Finger Lakes. There's a whole lot of pluses about it.
Yeah.
Thank you. One other question here. I'll throw out a controversial one for you folks. Why is it the Finger Lakes region's reputation for producing great reds isn't on a par with our whites, specifically Riesling? And feel free, anyone, to take that.
Oh, that's a hard question.
Well,
But no, you go right ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Well, we've known that Riesling grows so well in Finger Lakes, and it's something that is very special. And we have invested a lot of time in marketing and getting the word out so that people know that this is a region where Rieslings and aromatic whites thrive, and we can make them consistently from year to year. They're going to be different. They're going to express the vintage. They're going to be very expressive of terroir, if you're comfortable using that word, or climate and hydrology, if you'd rather go more technically. And it's been a very nice way for us to get people to be comfortable with the Finger Lakes as a region and understanding about the quality wines that we make. And we haven't really invested as much time in marketing and getting consumers educated about cool climate red wines. And I think we're starting to do that. We're investing more time in our vineyards. We're understanding our own geology better. We're understanding vinification techniques better. We're putting more work into the vineyards and growing these grapes and learning how far we can push things. We've done lots of experimentation. We've tasted each other's wines, and we've worked on learning what we do as a region and in this individual wineries. And that's the sort of stuff we're starting now to put out there. We want to educate our consumers about vintage variation and how that relates to wine characteristics from year to year, and then how those things translate into something at your table.
Thank you very much, Tricia. And that's going to wrap up our first flight this evening. And on behalf of the Wine Alliance, I'd like to thank the 4 winemakers here who fielded questions with their wines. And we're going to move you folks out of the way and bring in our next panel.
Thanks for joining
Thank
us.
you very much. So your wines for the second flight. The first wine that you have this evening is from Damiani Wine Cellars, 2010 Sunrise Hill Pinot Noir, and suggested retail price $28.99. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to tell you what the wines are, and then give everyone a few moments to taste them, and then we'll go through and talk about them individually, just like we did with the first flight. In Glass 2 from Three Brothers Winery and Estates, we have a 2010 Estate Barbera. And the price on that, $16. And then wine 3, the 2010 Syrah from Billsboro Winery on Seneca Lake also. It is 2010 Syrah. And then our fourth wine, another Seneca Lake Winery, Shaw Vineyards, 2006 Cabernet Sauvignon. And at this time, progress through with your tasting, and then we'll go through and talk about these wines individually. The wines, some of you might ask why we flighted them in the order that we did today. And your first flight, we had the kind of things that linked them together was the fact we had Cab Franc blended with the Lemberger, along with the Lemberger. And on this flight, they had less of a common theme, and that's why mixed in the same flight, you've got quite a few different varieties with the Pinot, Barbera, Syrah, and Cabernet Sauvignon. We'll give everyone like another minute, and then we're going to introduce that first wine and go ahead and talk about it. In a second, Glenn, I'll introduce you, and we'll let people ask your questions. So, folks, if you're on the other end on our conference call this evening, first wine is from Damiani Wine Cellars, and we have with us from Damiani this evening Glenn Allen. And Glenn is here to take your calls on that 2010 Sunrise Hill Pinot Noir. The grapes were actually grown just around the corner from my house. Beautiful vineyard. And Glenn's here to take some questions on that wine. And anyone have a question about that Damiani Pinot Noir? Nothing yet. Why don't you, Glenn, why don't you just give us a little feedback on the wine, how it was made, possibly something about the vineyard site, and any other information about that wine you'd like to give out.
Sure. In 2010, we made 3 different Pinot Noirs. This one's from the single vineyard Sunrise Hill, which is off of Cayuga Lake. As you said, it's probably the most meticulously farmed plot of land I've ever seen. So kudos to Bob and Kathy. They do a terrific job. This is the first time we've ever made 3 different Pinot Noirs. The source of our grapes predominantly is our own vineyard, but we did get Pinot from Sunrise Hill in 2010. It was so delicious and unique unto itself that we felt that it should be bottled separately. We also bottled a single vineyard upper block from the Davis vineyard, which has the exact same clonal selection as is present in the Sunrise Hill vineyard, yet they're quite different. So that's a nice examination of difference in terroir in the glass. The Davis has not been released yet. That'll probably come out next month. And then we have a third, which is also from the Davis vineyard. It's the lower block, and it's 100% 115 Dijon clone. Unique, again, from these 2. This one I chose for tonight because it's drinking so beautifully already, even though it's a 2010. Offers up a lot of perfume. It's very soft and almost feminine in style compared to the 2 Davis Pinots. So that's why I chose it. We're major Pinot fans at Damiani. So that's why we got it.
Anyone have any other questions for Glenn before we move on to our next wine?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Bo.
Yep.
The question is, I may have missed it, but what's the vine age, and how do they also react to the cold weather there?
Did you catch that, Glenn?
I do not know the vine age. I know these are not 100-year-old vines. I can vouch for that. But in terms of the cold, the biggest issue we have is whether or not the vines experience any damage through the winter or in the spring. In this case, we're having a little warm event now. We're worried about bud kill. Once the season starts, though, this is a cool climate region, and so the Pinot reflects that really typically earthy, almost truffle style of Pinot, as opposed to the more bright cherry and floral style that I often get in other Pinots. So in terms of the cool climate, it seems to be a perfect match for the Pinot.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the comment. We're going to move on to wine number 2 in this flight. And it's a 2010 Estate Barbera from Three Brothers Winery and Estates. Three Brothers has grown quite a bit in their short period in the Finger Lakes. And we have Justin Policelli with us this evening. And Justin can answer any questions you have concerning that estate-grown Barbera. Very, as far as I know, Justin, I don't know if anyone else in the Finger Lakes is making an estate-grown Barbera.
Not that I know of. I believe we're the only one.
Any questions for Justin about that wine before he goes through and talks a little bit about how it was made? Why don't you go ahead, Justin, and just give us a little feedback about how you made the wine?
Sure. This was something new for us, so I didn't really have a real strong direction on where I wanted to go. I had tried some Barberas, obviously, from other regions to try and get an idea on where to go. In the end, I decided to split the lot that we had, about 1,000 gallons, into 2 separate tanks. We do mostly stainless steel, and I chose 2 different oak programs for the individual tanks, and they were characteristics that I wanted to show up in the finish wine in different layers. So they aged in separate tanks for maybe 6 months, and we married them back together, and this is the final product. I'm extremely happy with it. I think there's a lot that I learned from this vintage, and we've changed some things in the upcoming vintage, but I think it shows well for Finger Lakes red wine, first time out of the gates.
So was that the first vintage off those vines then?
That was the first vintage.
Okay.
The vines went into the ground back in 2006, and that was the first time we took a substantial yield from them.
Any questions for Justin about that wine number 2?
I do. We can hit that one. We can hit that one. Jeff, I have a question.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to know why Barbera? I mean, Lemberger is a cool climate grape.
My answer to that now after the fact is why not Barbera? It seems to do.
What's the argument for Barbera in the Finger Lakes?
What's the argument in terms of why I chose it?
I think that's where you were getting at, right, Dave? Why it was chose for a variety to plant?
Well, then to take a stab at that, I think the Finger Lakes is still searching for, a fantastic red wine that we can produce, and this was just a stab at trying another variety.
Kind of a young wine region that's still trying to figure out exactly what varieties do well.
Yeah, I think we have our staples, and this was just, throw something else in the mix and see what other guys can do with it as well.
Any other questions for Justin? All right, then we're going to move on to the third wine here from fairly new winery in the Finger Lakes, Billsboro Winery. And Billsboro's been there for a while, but Vinny has recently been the owner. How many years, Vinny? 5 years? And this wine is 2010 Finger Lakes Syrah. And any questions for Vinny? Actually, Vinny, why don't you just give us the quick rundown on the wine, and then we'll see if we have any questions about it.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Well, I think we already discussed the vintage earlier, 2010 being a stellar year in the Finger Lakes, lots of growing degree days, and I think you can see the differences across the vintages, the way the fruit profile just pops, and it's just a lot richer mouthfeel in 2010 than you'd see other years. This variety is something I've been working with for about 5 vintages now. I give all the credit in the world to Sawmill Creek Vineyards on Seneca Lake, who provides me with the fruits. These vines are about 10 to 11 years old, and they've made it through several tough winters. I know several of you are concerned about the cold here. It's not as cold as I think some of you think. We can grow Syrah pretty successfully, and I really encourage my peers to grow it. I can't say enough good things about it, but this is made very traditionally, 1-ton bins, punch down. I use generally neutral Hungarian, some American oak, a little bit of new oak, maybe 10%, but not only is Syrah a great standalone variety, but in many vintages it's a great one to blend with our Bordeaux brethren that we grow here, Cab Franc, Cab Sauvignon, Merlot, even Lemberger. It's just very compatible with those varieties, and I think it's a winner. I think it's here to stay.
Any questions for Vinny? All right, we'll give you another second, see if anybody'd like to ask Vinny anything. And, yep. I think we got part of that. We got that you were questioning the use of Hungarian oak in Syrah. You want to take that, Vinny?
Sure. I can speak for Billsboro. It is a, I'd say, relatively new forest or new country that we are working with. I think, in practical terms, it's more affordable than French. Well, that's the practical terms. In the actual stylistically, it actually has some beautiful characteristics. It often brings a lot of spice and smoke to the wines. It has a very nice softness that seems compatible with Syrah and Lemberger. So I can't speak for everyone else, but the spiciness of the Hungarian oak really does very well with this particular variety. I'm actually planning to buy more Hungarian this year. I just feel like it's it's a good partner with Syrah.
Thanks for the great question. We're going to move on now to our last wine of the evening from Shaw Vineyards. We have Steve Shaw, owner and winemaker, with us this evening. And Steve, interestingly, had a wine with a little more bottle age that he brought, so I'm sure he's interested in some feedback on that wine. And right now I'm going to let Steve go ahead and talk to you a little bit about that wine.
Well, thank you. This is the 2006 Shaw Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon, obviously. It's made from 100% estate-grown grapes, and it was the vintage 2006 was fairly cool vintage overall compared to, say, 2010. I allowed the grapes to stay on the vine until mid-November, and decided that at that point, I wanted to bring them in. They had dehydrated some, and the grapes were destemmed, not crushed, into 1-ton fermenters, and there was an exceptionally long cold soak and skin contact prior to the start of the alcoholic fermentation, and the wine was on the skins for about 35 to 40 days total by the time it was pressed off, and there was a 2 to 3 times per day punch down regimen, and it was finally pressed off using a membrane press with fairly low pressure. The wine spent a long time in mostly 2 and 3 year old French oak barrels with a few new French oak barrels mixed in, and it was not racked often. So that's the basic rundown on the winemaking.
Anybody have any specific questions for Steve or some feedback on that wine? Any of the other winemakers care to comment on any of the wines this evening? We've got an extra few minutes.
I had a question on the Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just curious on the ageability of these wines. Seems like the tannin is very nice. I have a question.
Well, we got one at a time here. There was a question on the ageability of the Finger Lakes Reds.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess like any young region, that question may be open to a few thoughts about how our wines will age. But I personally, I feel with the strong acidic backbone the wine has, and hopefully the controlled yields in the vineyard, that there's no reason to think that we can't age wines once they're in the bottle 5 or 10 years. I think that's a story that's developing right now.
Yeah, I think the winemakers would probably, in consensus, say that we've all tasted each other's wines from at least that long back, and some a lot older, and a lot of those red wines were holding up very nicely.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some evidence that the wines will age. Anybody have was there one other question for Steve there that got cut off?
Can I get in here?
Yes. Did we have someone else that wanted to ask Steve a question?
Yeah, Jeff, that's me.
Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
I want to ask the panel, how do you get consumers who are so accustomed?
You got cut off, Dave.
Who are so used to over-oaked, over-extracted, overripe reds to appreciate, more elegant, restrained, lighter-body reds?
That's the $1 million question, Dave. It's one of you guys want to tackle that one?
Well, I think we've seen quite a lot of success in other old world regions with an old world style regimen and winemaking and wine growing.
I also can just speak from personal experience in the tasting room. Customers come through and are pleasantly surprised. The wines are very lively in the palate. We offer some new flavors and some very precise flavors as well. That's quite striking for many people, and so I guess the way to get people to appreciate them is to get them to taste them. One of the things that's on the list of questions here is why, or how far are we distributed? Well, in our particular wineries case, we're not distributed outside of New York. So that's one of the drawbacks or limitations to people getting a better sense for what the Finger Lakes can do is we are populated by a number of excellent wineries with very small production that sells quite a bit right here at the door. So come on down.
Yeah, I mean, there's a demand for these wines, for the style of these wines, I think, which is basically a testament to the fact that we all sell out of these wines almost, as quickly as we can make them. So I think that there's an audience. It's just a matter of building one, and I think that's already happening.
One of the successes we've had is introducing restaurateurs to the wines, and chefs in particular get very excited when they taste things like the Syrah. It's very distinctive, very interesting to them to then develop food pairings to put on their menu when they carry our wine. So it's been a lot of fun to introduce people to these wines.
So if we had any other questions, there was a couple questions that you folks had asked, and I'll just get back to a couple of those before we finish up. What are the Finger Lakes producers doing to get the word out beyond the borders of New York State? Well, tastings like this, for one, the group sponsoring this event, the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance, for many years has been kind of en masse submitting wines to national publications to kind of get our wines more on the national scene. And we're seeing that happen with more high 80 and 90 point ratings of Finger Lakes wines. And the word is out there. In your individual, if you pick up this month's Wine Enthusiast, there was 3 pages of Finger Lakes wines in there. So the word about Finger Lakes wine is definitely getting out beyond the borders of New York State. So anyone, before we wrap up this evening, have any questions for our panel of winemakers who are up here right now?
Yeah, I have another question, if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
There's a lot of traditional old world varieties being grown there. Is there a movement away from the hybridized grapes and more back to traditional European grapes?
We at Three Brothers, we have 30 acres of all vinifera, so we're going to have a single hybrid planted there. 16 of those acres were planted back in 1980, and they're all vinifera. And that's what has been made there, and we will continue to make there.
I think that the trend seems to be towards vinifera. I think hybrids do have a role in making some very solid table wines. But if you ask any winemaker, I think their preference is vinifera. There's always other reasons you grow other grapes, and generally that's an economical reason. Vinifera tends to yield smaller crops, where non-vinifera can yield larger crops and make very inexpensive or affordable wines. But I think the trend is vinifera. I think the wines we've tasted today, the varieties that you've had a chance to taste, are indicative of what's coming and what's in the future here in the Finger Lakes.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to wrap up the evening with? Well then, we're going to thank our panelists for bringing their wines tonight. And on behalf of the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance, thank all of you media folks for tasting our wines this evening. And look forward to having you taste with us again sometime. And we're going to let these guys just have a glass of wine and relax. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.